I had planned to pose some questions, but I think we have such powerful people here. I'm just going to open it up for conversations, questions. You can ask questions of Harry and Stephanie, but you can also ask questions of your colleagues or pose comments and commentary. So let's just open it up for a conversation. And this is hooked in, so speak loud. So, Jackie.
I think I get to be the plant here and ask the first question. So I'm sure one of the questions that is on a lot of people's minds is for Stephanie, and that is, how do you take the work that you do with 6-year-olds and extend it to thinking about 18 and 19-year-olds who are the students that we then see? Do the same strategies work to help develop executive function? What are the particular challenges in developing executive function at that age? And I know you've thought about this.
And let me add to that. Given our all-hands meeting and our changing demographics, what does it mean for black and brown children? What does it mean for black and brown adults and the diversity issue of our students on the campus? So, easy question.
Thank you. So I've begun to work with colleagues who also study this technique of psychological distancing, but with college students. So there's a Professor Ethan Cross at University of Michigan that I'm collaborating with, and Angela Duckworth at University of Pennsylvania, who's well known for the work on grit. And so we have a grant together from the Templeton Foundation to study psychological distancing as a tool that can be used at any age for increasing persistence, self-control, emotion regulation, delaying gratification, the marshmallow test. And we're using analogous types of techniques to see if they work across these age groups. And so the Batman example that I gave you, the college student version of that is, before you engage in this frustrating task or this boring task, some people find it helpful to think about being somebody else. Can you think of someone whom you admire as having good ability to endure frustration or boredom or to delay gratification? And think of that person now, write it down, and try to imagine being that person while you perform this task. And so the college students put down like Obama, it could be any character, any figure, real or fictional, living or not living, and just viewing the whole task from that perspective, we're seeing the same gains in persistence, frustration control, delay of gratification across these age groups. So I think that's a promising kind of example of how we can integrate that.
So again, there's a lot of overlap in skills of executive function and civic agency. So one of the things that actually we draw on in the theater department at Augsburg is the introduction of theater performance into public achievement experiences. At Maxfield, that was really striking how the taking on of roles enhanced students' projects and work in the world. But let me make another kind of level methodological point, and there's not really deep research on this. But I would argue that there's certainly a lot of suggestive evidence out of social movement and historical research in other fields that major change efforts, and even change efforts at the micro level like public achievement, can change the sense of plasticity around executive function skills. So a team of psychiatrists during the civil rights movement, a Harvard team, found that a variety of kinds of dysfunctions, from prostitution to drug use, radically declined during the days of the movement and had some lasting effects. So that's, again, a sense of consequentiality and plasticity that one, in a way, internalizes from seeing the environment as much more plastic and open and subject to change and agency than one had ever imagined before. And I think in practice, and we'll see this today, I think, young people who develop a sense that their environment is not static and set, but is actually subject to action, can change one's sense of self and the skills and abilities to focus, to reflect, to build relationships, and so forth.
I suppose one of my questions is better, but I suppose you can answer too. How does this idea of executive function transcend? Because there are certain fields
Louder.
Oh, sorry. Because there's certain fields that almost like support being, very impulsive and having a great painter. Monet is very impulsive in his paint. A lot of the canvas isn't actually painted, even though, compared to science or academics, which very much so sit, think, and process part of what you're going through, and then write up. So kind of how does it transcend?
It's a great question. So essentially, how do we kind of reconcile the acting in the environment and going along to get along, being self-controlled, being the type of pupil that every teacher dreams about, being not speaking until you're spoken to, following the rules, being very controlled, and so forth. How do we reconcile that with acting on and doing something that might be innovative, that might go against the status quo, and of course is necessary for lasting change in society? And so I want to emphasize that actually they're just two sides of the same coin of executive function and agency, to be both rule-bound and rule-breaking. So without executive function skills and that kind of cognitive flexibility, you wouldn't be able to innovate, you wouldn't be able to create, you wouldn't be able to imagine an alternative to reality. And so creativity, imagination, innovation are all intimately related to executive function skills. Even though, you might think, gosh, is every student supposed to become a robot? And is that really what we want? Not at all. We want kids to be able to have the ability to regulate. So that includes down regulation of I want to run around the classroom, or I want to hear myself talk in class, and down regulating that kind of impulse, but also up regulation of motivation, engagement, and thinking about things in a new way. And so that's really the key to innovation and creativity. And there are a lot of examples of creative artists who, who also have difficulties with addiction, mental illness, and so forth. So it's one of these fine lines, I think, in terms of being able to use these skills and build them for good.
So I think that's true. It's also true that, in my view, civic agency develops or points towards a complementary set of skills that are not simply the executive function skills. So, for example, building public relationships with people who really make you uncomfortable. Now, you can say executive function skills help with that, but there's a whole set of disciplines and practices out of the civic agency field that really cultivate that capacity. Or another capacity, thinking contextually. So being able to read the cultures of environments. Now, one could say that executive function skills helps with that, but the skills of being able to understand where people are coming from, the cultures, the contexts, that's actually something developed in good public achievement. You learn how to read the school. Or third, thinking politically. How do you understand and develop the habits, so these are democratic habits, of work in environments which make you uncomfortable, which are not with people that you agree with people who are very different and have different views and backgrounds and interests, and that's thinking politically, and it's learning how to live in ambiguity. So I think there's a complementarity, but I think the civic agency skills are not simply collapsible to the executive function skills.
Yeah, I have a question for Stephanie. So when, I kind of want to bring it back to your question, Ms. Peggy.
like Black and brown children who we know are heavily, the disparity with them and anger management and that are diagnosed with ADHD. And so, okay, so my question is, like, when you have neighborhoods, mainly Black and brown, you know, poverty-stricken, you know, drugs in the neighborhood, abuse in the neighborhood, all of that, and the kids end up in school, they got post-traumatic stress disorder, they're hungry, all that, they can't focus. So how does executive function, it seems like a reactionary tool to that, but like, how does that, like, clash with what's the root cause of the problem?
Thank you for the questions.
So, poverty and the achievement gap are, you know, these are grand challenges. These are pernicious problems in the 21st century that, you know, there's not going to be a single magic bullet like, well, executive function is going to be the answer. But I do think it's an important start to trying to understand how the empowerment begins early in life to have choices and to become aware of choices. And that empowerment, empowering parents, empowering teachers in your communities to empower kids to have choices, has to be an essential kind of starting point. And I actually put this up to try to illustrate how I think about this. And through things like teaching teachers about executive function so that they see what they're doing already in the classroom through a lens of, you know, oh, okay, I see how this activity, this technique, this unit is actually, if I did this a little, just tweaked this a little bit, this actually helps build executive function skills in my students. Using formative assessment where we're not just measuring achievement and IQ in our kids, but let's start measuring executive function on a regular basis. Let's get a baseline, universal screening for early detection of difficulties in this area. And together, I believe the process model here is that we increase their preparation for school. By increasing preparation for school, you increase learning. As Phil mentioned, kids who arrive at school with higher executive function skills learn the new material that's presented to them faster, more efficiently. And when kids are learning, when school is feeling like a worthwhile place to be, they're more engaged. And feeling like a self-efficacious person, that my activities, my actions, my ideas, my opinions matter, has to, you know, help with engagement and ultimately increasing achievement and increasing opportunities and reducing gaps in achievement and opportunity. That's kind of the process model of how I think executive function could be a starting point for addressing some of these difficult challenges.
So let me make 3 points. First of all, the awareness of choice is very much like what you wrote about. Natasha did a great piece for me on public narrative, in which young people who felt they didn't have any power come to see themselves as having some agency in the world and being able to make choices, and that's a foundation for actually taking action. Secondly, I think the implications in the literature that I've seen about executive function haven't been drawn out, but the literature on what makes for executive function skill development is very radical in terms of challenge to conventional education. And I would say this is a disagreement I have with Rolnick. I don't think he notes this at all. You can't engineer from the outside young people's developing executive function skills. In fact, one of the themes that you stressed was the need for old-fashioned play. Well, old-fashioned play is which we've lost a lot of in our society, in an increasingly scripted society, are opportunities for kids to do self-directed activity. I mean, it makes elemental sense that you develop skills of self-direction through experience in self-directed activity, right? And thirdly, I would say that, and this is a good overlap with public achievement, one of the findings, and it's in the Adele Simmons article from Science about environments like Montessori education, which make for executive function skills, a key variable is experiences which tap young people's or anybody's strong motivation, which in organizing civic agency terms would be called self-interests. So that's just not the way schools are set up now. Schools are not set up to ask, how can we tap kids' self-interest? So that goes to making schools colleges much more student ready than thinking about how students can fit into our preset agenda of what they need to learn.